trust Ferguson Roof Systems to replace your roof, we go the extra mile to protect your home and property. On every job, we deploy durable netting to protect your home's exterior and landscaping. It's just one more reason why you should call Ferguson Roof Systems today.
Hey there, I'm Meteorologist Tuttle, back with you again. It is Tuesday. I had to think about that for a minute. Every time you get like a day off, your whole week is just shot, right? You know what time of the day it was. I felt like that during all the COVID. I don't even know what year it was. So anyway, welcome to the broadcast. We're talking about the weather forecast for tonight and tomorrow. Got some thunderstorms that'll roll through the states. We'll take a look at that. And then also a little sneak peek what's happening up in the northern part of the country. A big winter storm there. And then finally, there's already been some scuttlebutt going on across the state. For Sunday is when we're going to have severe weather. So we'll talk about that also. So thanks for joining me. Make sure you like and share this video. Tell your friends and family about AT's weather. If you're watching me on YouTube, hit the like button. That way the algorithms know. As you guys know, as you've been paying attention on social media. Annette, by the way, if you are not getting notices, because you need to go and change your settings for the page on the follow button. So click on the follow button while you're on your phone at the top in the little dots, and you can click to get notified during all the lives. So I posted a few times off and on last few months on how to fix that, just because it's been so commonplace. But anyway, so what was I saying? I have no idea. Got sidetracked. Oh, I was going to say was AI. By the way, Mary, thank you for the stars out there on Facebook world. If you haven't noticed by now, there's a lot of AI stuff going on. All right, there's Chat GPT. There's something called Consensus for like medical information, like pulling up studies and that kind of thing. There is some other Chat GPT type. Comparisons is like I think Bing has one really called Sydney from Microsoft, and then Google's got one coming out. The bottom line is all these companies are rushing this all out to market because it kind of helps to facilitate a lot of things that happen on the back end electronic side for all this kind of stuff that we do here. So in other words, the algorithms pay attention to what you like, what you don't like, that kind of stuff. So the more you like and interact with my broadcasts or with my posts that I make, the more you get rewarded by seeing my content. Otherwise, it'll wipe it and you'll never see me again. And we don't want that to happen, do we? So you got to play the AI game and click the buttons and the share and the comments and all that stuff. It's like think of like a social credit score, but on the good sense, because that's coming too. Jeez, this world's changing fast. That way, social credit score can be like, oh, okay, I'm liking AT stuff, so I'm gonna keep getting content, from that. And then if you stop doing it, well, your score goes down, and then all of a sudden you don't get the content anymore. So that's probably one way that you can kind of help that out. Other than check and make sure your settings haven't changed, which they like to do on YouTube, like to change those for you behind your back. Isn't that nice of them? All right, so all that housekeeping out of the way. On the opt-in, by the way, it's still available. So click on the link below if you're watching on Facebook, and that way you can opt in through your instant messenger, and I'll send you a direct notification when I do go live. Speaking of which, I just sent out one just now. I usually send out before I get started, but I got sidetracked on all this stuff and I forgot to hit the button. So we'll have a few more followers that'll come in. A few hundred of you utilize that functionality. Okay, so all that's done. All my streams are up and running. You guys on YouTube, thanks for checking in. I see as well from all over the state. A lot of people from Tulsa in the house tonight. Always like seeing you guys check in from different areas. Sometimes it'd be cool if you just say, hey, I'm checking in from, such town. Just kind of give me an idea of where you guys are all coming in from, right? All right, let me take a look here at the data we've got here for you for the show. Let me load up this guy too. We're going to see some rainfall develop tonight here across Oklahoma from southwest to northeast. So you will probably hear some rumbles of thunder once we get toward the daybreak hours here across the state. I'm going to show you what's happening out there currently. And out there right now, as far as the rainfall goes, things are pretty quiet. If you look out here into the panhandle, you do see the beginning stages of that activity, and that'll be making its way into southwest Oklahoma well after midnight tonight, and then continue the slow trek up to the north and east from there. Now, as we talked about, we do have a little bit of a risk of severe weather. This is the 4-panel outlook from the Storm Prediction Center, which does highlight the top left panel, where you see the yellow, is for just the generic risk value. So there was a slight risk of severe storms. And that does come through the Tulsa area here and just barely clips Oklahoma City down to Ardmore and then back out here towards a pretty good part of Missouri. If you look at the panel here, this is the tornado outlook. This is the potential outline of where you might see a stray tornado within this. It'd be a freak occurrence. Same thing with the hail, kind of the same area. And then the winds, a little bit better probability than the hail or the tornado. Might get some wind gusts up around 60 plus miles per hour in a couple of these storms. So it's not a big deal. It's a low end event. So very low, the tornado scale, hail size up to a quarter. This is probably the biggest one they'll actually realize. Somebody somewhere probably get about 60 to 70 mile per hour winds within this from the data that I've seen. If you look at Tulsa, same idea, low, small hail, and wind gusts up to around 60 to 70 miles per hour. That extends into northwestern Arkansas and also southwestern Missouri. I don't have Missouri on here, but you guys are included in that. Timing-wise, we talked about it through the midnight hours when things will start getting going out here in far southwest Oklahoma. And then that'll creep on into central Oklahoma between 2 and 7 o'clock in the morning. And then there's 3 to 9 in southeast Oklahoma. Now there's a talk about severe weather for Sunday already. People are already sounding alarms, getting all excited. Probably have storm chasers in your feeds, going all nuts. Probably seeing some model data getting posted. Only I can tell you now is that today's Tuesday, and this is for Sunday, and you know as well as I do, things change all the time. But needless to say, it'll be something we'll keep an eye on. Here's a look at the entire picture of the country. The reason I want to show you this time around, focus this big blue area. You see all this snow? And that is a ton of it stretching through South Dakota, heading to the northern Rockies, and then back out east towards Chicago. So watch what happens here through the overnight period into tomorrow morning. That system expands into the midday hours on Wednesday across the Great Lakes and Northeast. And look at all those red you see on the map. That is a lot of freezing rain that's going to occur in that area. This is a pretty big ice storm on the southern fringe of it, as well as a nasty blizzard snowstorm on the north end. I mean, this is a heck of a winter storm. It is a long east to west line of nonsense that is all across that area. That extends on into Wednesday before it starts to kind of wrap up here on Thursday, with it moving on into southern Canada, then getting out of here. You see a new little system out here in the western coastline from the Pacific Northwest. And look what it's doing in California. You see this blue? That is a lot of snow in California with this system here toward the end of the week. And we have this big ridge of high pressure that settles in for Thursday and Friday, bringing us a little taste of the Arctic air. Now, will it produce a little bit of light freezing rain? We'll take a look at that here, a little close-up here in just a minute. But over the weekend, there's that snow still going down in Southern California. Can you believe that? Wouldn't it be crazy if it snowed in LA or something, or San Diego, where it's always sunny and 70? So it could happen. That's on the picture there. All right, here's a look at the ice accumulations up to our north. You can see anywhere from a quarter to a half inch here across the Great Lakes region, east to west along these states. And if you were to look, this is the fun map I wanted to show you, really. It was a total snowfall. These numbers up here in the feet, like 1 to 2 feet of snow in a wide, large region. So travel up here is not recommended here in the middle of this week. It's going to be gross. So that'll be making the news over the next day or two. All right, so here is a look at the precipitation for tonight in the model data coming in out of the west of us. So there's that heavier stuff now moving to southwest Oklahoma at 3 o'clock in the morning. So some rumbles of thunder with that stuff. And then we head into 4 o'clock in the morning. It's moved into Oklahoma City. Right now, the models predict and I struggle to say this, but the best instability, because there's not a whole lot, but down across the southern half of the state at the beginning of this event. So there's 4 o'clock in the morning, so some thunderstorms here down toward Paoli, Pauls Valley. And then what happens is these thunderstorms kind of expand a little bit north and east toward Tulsa at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. So like I said, Oklahoma City, you might hear it off in the distance, but I'm just not really expecting much here. Otherwise, this stuff kind of lines out a little bit in northeastern Oklahoma, back down into North Texas to Dallas-Fort Worth at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's a very early morning event. So the roads will be wet for your morning commute in both towns. Otherwise, by 8 o'clock, that stuff's starting to wrap up here in central Oklahoma. So by 9, it's pretty much out of the metro. And by 10 or 11, it's pretty much out of Tulsa and the rest of the state, moving off into Arkansas and Missouri. So what I had shown on here were the potential for severe storms with helicity tracks, which indicate some rotation, so some hail and stuff. None of that to be found. Just wasn't in the data. But there again, there might be a little bit of wind with that. Let's take a look here at the wind and distance here, or the wind distance, the wind direction. That's the other D word I was looking for. South wind here around 20 knots sustained. So it'll be very windy tonight into tomorrow morning. So just keep that in mind. You're going to hear a lot of wind. And even with this batch of rain that moves in, it's going to carry some wind with it. Sustained winds up around 25. And I'll show you the gusts here in a second. So that first round here this morning when you're getting up, or before you get up, you're going to hear it outside your window. And then by 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning, these southwest winds kick in during the day. Sustained winds up around 20 to 30 miles per hour through our Wednesday. So hang on to your hats, your breeches, your skirts, whatever you want to wear, because this is going to be a windy day. Then in the afternoon, it starts to calm down a little bit. You can see this little boundary up here to the north. That's the leading edge of that Arctic front. Wednesday evening sneaking into northern Oklahoma, cooling temperatures down. And then by the time we head into Thursday morning, very early, that boundary will be making its way into the Oklahoma City metro, also into Tulsa. So when you get up Thursday morning, it's going to be quite a bit colder with a north wind coming in. All those winds aren't quite that strong. So let's take a look at those wind gusts like I talked about. Where you see the red is anywhere from about 40 to about 50 miles per hour. If you see some yellows on the map, that's around 50 to 60 miles per hour. So winds are expected to be cranking here coming up for overnight tonight. Now you can shave a little bit off these numbers because these will be usually not quite realized at the surface due to friction, etc. But it's going to be a windy night tonight through tomorrow morning. Here's 7 o'clock. You do get some lulls there in southern Oklahoma behind the line. Otherwise, those winds kick back in, gusting up around 40 in the morning hours throughout the state here through the late morning to around lunchtime. About around 35 to 40 in most cases. The strongest winds moving to eastern Oklahoma for our Wednesday afternoon. A little bit of a lull here in central, but still some pretty good gusts. And look at those winds out in the panhandle. I mean, they're off the charts, man. When you see those yellows in there, that's ridiculous wind. But they're used to it out there. That will spread back over the state for Wednesday evening out ahead of that cold front that's moving on in. And that's the last hurrah of a really strong gusty wind. So that's a very windy period through Thursday early morning. I mean, very early. So we'll call it late Wednesday night. All right. So that's a good 24 hours. We're going to have some pretty decent winds across the state. Okay. So you know it's going to be windy. You know we got some rain. Rainfall totals. This is the model blend, which means, you know, it's going to take all of them, blend them together. And the take home here is that the highest amounts will be kind of around the Tulsa area due south. And then kind of east from there. So there will be some pockets here around an inch to half an inch, maybe an inch. If you were to pick out individual models, you know, that has convective elements in there, some of these are going to try to indicate where some areas may get an inch of rain, and each one will show a little different positioning. So that's why I sometimes like to use the blend, just because they're all going to say something a little different. Like here's one that only has a few tenths or hundredths here in central Oklahoma, but again, some stretching blue here and white, which indicates maybe up to 3/4 of an inch of rain. There's some spots here in red over an inch. So, but take home here again is that the best rain will be accumulating in the eastern half of the state. Okay, so temperatures. Let's do that for you. Another warm day tomorrow. Let's take a look here. At 4 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be into the 50s when you get up in the morning. And then into the afternoon, look at this rebounding into the 60s and 70s. So not as quite as warm as it was today in some areas, but still pretty decent. And then you can see that cooling trend there to the north. In other words, the colors up here. Like Enid, for example. Let's just say if the model was completely right on the money for the position of the Arctic front. In other words, it doesn't quite get to Enid. All you got to do is drive north by about 10 miles and you run into 40-degree temperatures up here and the rest of northwestern Oklahoma. Just north of Woodward. So that's kind of the leading edge of that colder air. Now what happens is, of course, it sags southward overnight. So there's Thursday morning. We drop into the 30s and 20s in that blue shading. Here even at Oklahoma City on Thursday, we do dip you down to probably pretty close to freezing. And we'll probably likely be at that point of freezing. And then 20s north from there. Now the models do try to rebound a little bit for Thursday. So it does get us back into the 40s. This, of course, will be a little questionable. We'll see if there's any cloud cover that can develop, kind of retard the warmth of that daytime with the sunshine. But regardless, as we head into Thursday night and Friday morning, a little secondary push gets us back into the 20s and 30s statewide. And then we kind of find out what happens. Usually the models don't do too well with the Arctic air. So we'll look at the Canadian model. for this one. So here's a look at Friday afternoon, for example. So it keeps us locked in the cold. So it's got like a temperature of 32 degrees here in Oklahoma City, up to Enid, 31, like Ponca City, Tulsa's. I got them above freezing of 35. But there's a little stretch here in this blue area where you see temperatures either at or below freezing. The reason why that's important, and also dew points here will be probably in the 20s. Let me check these out. Yeah, they're in the 20s here. So your wet bulb temperature will be colder than the air temperature if we can get some precipitation. So this is where things get interesting. So it's going to be a very light overrunning style setup in the atmosphere, which can produce some light rain, very light rain. And you see the little pink on the map? So that, for example, is indicative of freezing rain. So here's a look at that sounding profile where you can see the outcome here say freezing rain. And this is the profile where the temperatures are saturated through a pretty good thickness of the atmosphere with the temperatures below freezing at the surface. So it's not a whole lot of moisture. In other words, it's very dry in the upper levels, but the lower to mid-level range, there's enough to at least get something going, very, very light. So in theory, we could have some very light freezing rain bubble up here, either from central to northern, northeastern Oklahoma into Kansas. And if that were to happen for Friday afternoon or early evening, just be careful. You might have to deal with some very slick bridges and overpasses just briefly for a brief time. That's just a very weak signal that's in the data, and that's about it. Temperature-wise, obviously quite cold on Friday. We'll probably struggle to hit 38. I'm not so sure we'll hit 38. We'll probably be in the low 30s during the day, maybe mid 30s. We'll see. And then Thursday, of course, this is a topsy-turvy number. We'll be falling down. So we'll be into the 30s most of our Thursday with some low 40s kind of rebounding in there. And then Saturday looks pretty decent. And these numbers also look pretty decent, at least for a while through the early part of March. I can tell you that we're still looking at a pattern flip as far as cold air is concerned from the Arctic coming back down this direction. And it's got its eyeball kind of in this facility, somewhere right around here toward the end of the period. So these numbers here may have to be adjusted. We head in toward the end of the first week of March. So somewhere right around there, we may not be dealing with another Arctic blast moving into Oklahoma. That would be very rude. But, you know, it's one of those deals that keeps your closet constantly circulating, so you don't have to worry about dust. So anyway, there you go. Okay, well, let's see. Apparently somebody's birthday today because Dawn's all over it. Well, happy birthday, Dawn. Let's see here. Oh, Jen, your dad is stuck in Minneapolis right now. Boy, I hope he packed a lunch. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. Rami, thank you for the stars, by the way. But yeah, it looks pretty good here for Oklahoma. You know, it's hard sometimes to get a storm system through here as we head into spring or even during spring to not get some form of severe weather. What we have is not a lot of instability. It's very marginal, and we still have a little bit of weak cap aloft in the mid-levels. So that's what I'm saying. Most of the storms are pretty weak, and that usually gives you the best potential for some damaging winds. If you can get a couple of those storms that can tap into the environment, kind of an isolated deal. The tornado threat, there's enough shear, I guess, that could possibly happen. It's a really low probability event, kind of a freak deal. Oh, Stefan, I see your comment. So Stefan lives near Montreal in Canada on the other side of the border. He's my weather watcher up there. So he always sends me his pictures of his ridiculous amounts of snow. He had a 5-foot drift or something piled up so high it's to the second level of his house. No, it was 9 feet or something. It was crazy, whatever it was. Casey, I see your coffee. I need a coffee, man. 500 stars. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. When you say Arctic air, how cold we talking? Luke, he's already wanting to know the details. So typically, when Arctic air comes in here, you get very dry air. In other words, dew point values must be at least into the single digits. So that's one aspect. Sometimes they can be in the teens if you get precipitation that falls, but otherwise usually it comes in dry. Initially, it's about single digits, and sometimes it can be below 0. It can be like a -5 dew point. That's one indication. The other is winds are blowing pretty hard in Denver. I bet it's going to be windy all across the country because of that big storm system coming in from here and then stretching up to the north, traveling east. The other is usually when you're dealing with this kind of cold, we source it, the source region. Usually, though, they're up there around -40 degrees, somewhere right around there, -50, something like that at the worst. So, but that atmosphere, that air mass, has to travel across a lot of land, which means a lot of friction, which means a lot of moderation. By the time it gets here, depending on how long it takes as to how long it gets a chance to modify. And if it can come here pretty quick, in other words, if we could have it, say, move from Alaska to Oklahoma in about 36 hours, there's not much time to moderate, right? And that's a fast mover, but that can happen. And when that does, you can really get some cold air. So, that's where we kind of get our temperatures that can fall quickly into, say, single digits, low teens real easily. So, but also what helps is to have, let's just say, a blanket of snow between us and it. So the more snowpack you can have on the ground between Oklahoma and the Canadian border, or even into Canada, so the more snow that's on the ground, the less that atmosphere, or I keep saying atmosphere, less that air mass can erode or modify, which means it comes in even colder. So if you really want the cold stuff, you want a trajectory that comes in across from northwestern Canada down along the Rockies in Oklahoma. That's the coldest path for us and the quickest. And as long as there's some snow on the ground, a lot less moderation. That's where we get our best bang for the buck. So watch for that to happen right about probably the 8th or 9th of March right now is the best guess. Cindy in the house with some stars. 500. Woohoo. Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate that. Robert, thank you as well. You guys are awesome. So that's pretty much it. I don't really have anything more. I'll keep an eye on the storms for Sunday. Let me see something here real quick. So you guys are funny. Robert wants me to give him a sounding for Tulsa. I like how educated you guys are. I've taught you well. Yeah, think about it. How often in your past, before I came along, did you ever say, hey, can you show me a sounding for my town? There's no way you would have ever said that. Not in a million years. Shelly, thank you for the stars. So, Robert, since you asked, I shall deliver. Let's see. What did you want it? You want it for about 6 o'clock in the morning when those storms come through, right? Something like that. Let's go see. All right. Where are we? Back here. Let's go to... There's 5 o'clock in the morning. We'll go to right before they get there. All right, so what you have here is a messy wind profile for the shear. Now the hazard type for the sounding still indicates possible tornado and a low end on the strength of 1. But it also has a pretty significant cap, minus 100 sin at the surface. So it's not going to be really indicative of anything surface-based, a little bit more elevated. We have a little bit of less of a cap in this area and a little better cape, elevated cape in this area. So usually that means is it's going to be extremely hard to get a tornado. It's not impossible, but it's pretty darn hard. But regardless, that's kind of the marginal situation there. I'm not overly excited about it. I would consider it a freak event if that were to happen. So if we got one across the state, for example, in the morning hours, like toward your area, then it wouldn't surprise me, but that's probably all I'd expect out of it. So that's good. But we're not really in the tornado season yet. That usually happens normally whenever we go into the middle part of March. This year, if winter looks like it's going to hang on a little longer, that may delay us into, say, April. But anyway, Ron... That's hilarious. Don't tell her that. We're fighting words. All right, so let me look at Sunday real quick. I know you guys have probably already heard all the nonsense. Let me just talk about that. Let me address it, and then we'll get on with it. By the way, let me show you this. So the upper level of the atmosphere. This is our little storm system that's zipping through tomorrow, and see how it comes right over Oklahoma. Nice little bright colors with it. The brighter the colors, the stronger the lift in the atmosphere. So it's a pretty good one. Then this guy back here, so this is like the first wave that then comes up across the Great Lakes. So it hits us first, but all that energy travels due north, northeast, right across the Great Lakes region. Then here's that secondary big batch out here in the west, northwest. So a piece of that breaks off as well and goes through the Great Lakes adding to their snow. And then back out here in the western coastline, the rest of it kind of cuts off into an upper low that sits there and spins across California, and that's how they can get some snow with theirs, just because there's so much cold air aloft within the storm system for the latter out of the end of the week and the early part of the weekend. We're kind of stuck in this southwesterly flow aloft, which can also trigger these little disturbances that rotate through, and that can help trigger a little bit of light precipitation sometimes. Okay, so now let's go on with forward from there. Let's take a look at the newest American models come out, and we'll see what the position of the next upper low is for the weekend. This is kind of important for us, right? Okay, so this is Sunday morning. Okay, there's midday, late afternoon, and then here's the 7 o'clock time frame. All right, so let's see how this evolves. So it goes right through the northwestern part of the state into central Kansas through Sunday night. So it's a fast mover. All right, by midnight it's already in western Oklahoma. All right, so let's go back here to the kickoff time. So basically 6 o'clock magic. And then we're going to see what else we got to play with. All right, so we're going to do a little forecasting for you on the fly. So we're going to kind of teach you what we can look at. So first thing we know is we have our upper low right here. And what we know is when that does happen, you get a nice little divergent pattern in the wind fields that come out ahead of it in this fashion. So you get lift in this quadrant of the state in the atmosphere, and all these colors represent like lift in the atmosphere. So you kind of have a nice jet stream split flow aloft along with the vorticity or the spin that you need to kind of get things moving. So let's go into the 300 millibar level at this point. All right, so same idea. We've got a jet core that's coming right through this region on up to the north. So the jet core is coming over the Texas Panhandle into western Oklahoma. So right now, everything looks good for severe weather with these two charts for the Panhandle and western Oklahoma. That's the favorable position for all that as far as the energy aloft and the jet stream aloft. But there's more to the story than that. So now let's zoom in down a little closer, and let's go see what we're working with where it matters. Okay, first off, we can do a 500 millibar jet max, and we have one that's rotating around the low here, which is zipping through. So it's called speed max. So usually when this comes in, it helps to enhance thunderstorm development. So that looks like it's, again, favored for the Panhandle and far western Oklahoma right at dark. Okay, just so you know, that's the timing on that. All right, let's go to, what else we got? Let's just do some moisture. All right, so far temperatures out here, by the way, are into the low 70s, so that's good. Upper 60s, mid 60s out in our neck of the woods. Let's go to what is expected to be cloud cover at that time for any solar insolation. And we have a lot of cloud cover. Matter of fact, model thinks we're 100% saturated with cloud cover, which means very little sun, so that's not going to help to warm things up. All right, so now let's go to the theta E. So we can see we have a really good moisture axis coming in, and we do in this region coming in, but it's really anemic here. It's still there, but it's not quite as deep. Let's see what the dew points look like. Oh, okay. So like I thought, one of the big things we were lacking was return of deep low-level moisture, and right now the dew points out here are into the mid-50s. There's some upper 50s sneaking in there. Otherwise, it looks like 55, 54, some down here, 54. Panhandle's bone dry out here in the 30s, so we don't have enough moisture to get in here into this zone. So things are kind of a little off. We don't have some of the upper energy and some of that juxtaposed with the lower level instability quite just yet. Most of the deeper moisture is out here in central and eastern Oklahoma from this event. Now, if you were just to say, okay, well, what does the atmosphere look like at this point in time? We'll show it to you. So we'll go to Oklahoma City first. What we have here is some pretty decent shear in the atmosphere. But because we don't have really any solar insulation, and the models have us completely saturated from top down to bottom, very little instability, just a few hundred on the Cape joules per kilogram. Still has a little bit of a weak cap as well. And you need a kicker. You need to have something at the surface to get some storms to go. Let's go Tulsa just for fun. It should be pretty identical to Oklahoma City, and it does, except the cap is stronger. This little nudge here. So you have a stronger cap, which means less opportunity for some rain. So now let's go out here in western Oklahoma, Roger Mills County. See what that looks like. All right, so in that particular case, Cape's still about the same, right around 500, but you have a really decent cap as well in this area here at the surface, so it's going to be kind of elevated. Shear's okay. The speed direction, the speed shear is off the charts. Directional shear is pretty decent. So if a storm were to go in that environment, it'd rotate like crazy. It'd probably LCL's high, so probably an LA hailmaker is what it would be out here in western Oklahoma. So it'd be kind of a supercell hail-making thunderstorm that's kind of anemic, starved for the juice to get tornadoes to go. Now this is right at dark, for example. So this is the late afternoon, early evening development. Let's see what else we have here. Did I do vertical velocities? I did not. All right, so vertical velocities at 700 millibars, a lot of lift within this, so that means these are all trigger points. Try to get some thunderstorms to go. And I didn't plot the wind speeds on the dew point map. We can do that here. So this is where the dry line is kind of developing, kind of very far eastern Texas panhandle, so the county's out here. And because the theta E axis didn't look all that robust, the moisture just isn't quite thick enough in that area. Now if we look at some of the parameters, we'll look at the overlay, which is the shear and the cape. So you see the gray areas, that's where you have very light or very weak instability. This is about as marginal as you can get. The shear though, see a little triangle, you have a little red line here and a black line here. See that angle between the two? Looks like it's probably about 45 degrees. So the bigger this spread, the angle, like closer to 90, the better you have for potential for rotating storms and to get tornadoes to develop. So at least what you can get out of this is that the best shear seems to be across these southern counties into North Texas, Dallas, back up here toward Tulsa. And it's a little messy here in central Oklahoma, but not bad in southwest Oklahoma. So you have some decent shear across the state, but the capes are really, really sad. Photographs within that, they're a little messy, but they got a little bit of a curve to them. And let's see what else. Let's do supercell composite, I guess. So out here, you do have at least some indication that the atmosphere can produce a supercell storm, although very, very low. Remember the scales here at the bottom goes all the way up to like 46, and we're at the 1, 2, 3 to 4 to 5 category in this region. So that's pretty lame, right? So it's not very strong. So when you look at the early data and you're getting all excited and all worked up over stuff, should you really be? No, I don't. At least not at this point. So let's go forward in time. Let's go into the evening hours because it's a fast mover, remember? So this is going to be at 9 o'clock in the evening. Our supercell number's at 3 here in Oklahoma City. Remember, that's 3 out of 46. That's not very good odds. The shear still looks pretty decent, though, for the directional shear and the speed shear. Photographs probably still have a little bit of a curve. Oh, yeah. Nice little speed with all of these. So some photographs look pretty decent in the vicinity. Let's see what else we got. Let's go back up to our juicy dew point values. So our dew point's still holding its the low 60s. And we'll look at the wind barbs. So the winds are cranking too, about 20 knots. So we probably have a decent low-level jets kicked in by this point. Theta E axis is more broad, but it's more piped in here than it was before. It's more solidified. So that's an improvement. Let's see here. Let's go to the 850 millibar height for winds. And so these these wind speeds out here are the south to southwest, around 50 knots. That's a pretty screaming low-level jet. All right, and then I think our temperatures are probably still holding right around 60, 65, it says there. So we've got a little instability to work with. We got a lot more moisture to work with by this point in time. See how the lift looks. 700 millibars. It's off the charts through here, which indicates this is when things really get cranking. So in other words, the didn't have everything together in western Oklahoma, in the eastern Texas Panhandle, but things got better by the time you head from the 6 o'clock hour to the 9 o'clock hour as it moved into central Oklahoma. So that's what the data would suggest at this point in time. So now, let's see, 500 millibars. Speed max is still kicking out across the west. A little lull here in central Oklahoma. It kind of more focused to the west. It doesn't really help us any to get storms to go nuts. Jet stream aloft. Still pretty decent split overhead, so that's still favorable. That's kind of like a breathing mechanism at the top of the storm, kind of like a vacuum cleaner way up top. It kind of helps to evacuate the air and pull things northward, upward, I should say, in the atmosphere to get the storms to develop and get a bit more robust. And then finally, let's just take a look at what the model thinks the precipitation is going to look like. All right, so at this point in time, the model has this nice cluster of storms here. If you go back 3 hours, there's a 0Z time frame. It did try to get something going out here in this direction and something going on in this direction. If you remember, there was a very, very weak cap in this region versus out in this area. So it's trying to say, even though we don't have any surface convergence with the weak cap, we should try to get a couple of storms to go. And then we talked about before, given the environment, they look like they might be a little bit more high-based out in western Oklahoma. If I pick a spot in southwest Oklahoma, we have very marginal instability. Still, Cape value's pretty low and very strong cap. So, again, same thing. So these guys aren't really going into the best environment. So let's go back to that 3 hour window. So let's go to the 9 o'clock time frame. So we're looking here now at Canadian County where it's got thunderstorms north and south through Enid, then back down to Lackawanna. So we'll go click a sounding here in Oklahoma City at this point in time. How has our atmosphere changed? So at this point in time, the model suggests a marginal tornado risk. LCLs are quite lower, which is lifting condensation level. In other words, the cloud base is much lower. Unfortunately, we still have a pretty good cap that's building back in. And the Cape values have come up. They're around 500. There's 600 at most. So we're still missing. We're missing the deeper moisture. We didn't really get to heat up very much. So there wasn't enough instability with heating during the day. So that's the weakness there. If we go in another 3 hours, it's now shifted to Tulsa, so it's already out of Oklahoma City at midnight, Sunday night and Monday morning, and it's now basically north to south. So usually what's going to happen is you're going to have a squall line that develops in this case. And the squall line is going to be our typical squall line, which is to be pockets of little hail, little wind within it. Nothing too crazy on the hail size because instabilities are pretty low. The wind, usually you always get pockets of 60 somewhere. And then, with the shear the way it is, we'll probably see some QLCS type tornadoes along the leading edge of that, which are random. They kind of here 1 minute, gone the next. And that's just because the shear, the wind speeds within this environment are quite strong. So it's very shear driven because the instability is almost nil during this entire time frame. So it's barely enough instability to get the squall line to form for one. It's almost not even enough to have it stay surface based and have it a little bit more elevated. So bottom line take home for this is, yes, we're going to have some storms on Sunday night, quickly moving through the state west to east. They will be marginally severe, pockets of wind, and then at the worst case, there might be a couple of QLCS type tornadoes somewhere embedded in the squall line as it moves through quickly from west to east. And that, of course, that activity continues eastward to Arkansas by early Monday morning and also into Missouri. So same kind of outcome there. So if you're saying, hey, compared to all the severe weather setups you've seen, How does this one look compared to those? I'm going to say it looks like it's February. So that's what I'm going to say. Doesn't look like March, April, or May. But, it's something. So there you go. I mean, if you want to get all worked up over that, I guess have at it. But me, when I see that data, I sleep really good at night going, that looks pretty lame to me. Once we get into the real window of the convective models, so once let's see, what's that, Sunday night? So once we get into, let's just say Thursday night data that comes in. So that's Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. Yeah, 72 hours out. So once we get to that window onward, then that's when we'll be able to see a lot more detail, and we'll see if it's still looking pretty lame or if it's going to look a little bit better for tornadoes or something like that. Beth, by the way, you're welcome. Thank you for the stars. I appreciate you. When we do have those type of storms, though, that do develop, just remember to check in with me when it comes to the coverage for that. So I'll cover the tornadoes if they're going to happen. And I do things obviously way differently if you're new here, especially like if you moved in from California or something. You've heard we have tornadoes and you're scared, to go to bed at night, one eye open. Watch me. I'll completely remove all your anxiety. 2, I'll put you to sleep. And 3, I'll... I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I'll show you the science behind what's happening with the storms. And then we'll look actually underneath them to show you that the majority of times when we do have these things that develop, it's usually over open farmland. It's trees. It's over rivers. I mean, there's usually nothing in its way because they don't last very long. They're usually on the scale of minutes and on the low end of minutes, not the upper end. So they're usually quick, short lasting, and the strength of them can vary, depending on the atmosphere. But the majority of tornadoes are EF0 to EF1, which means they're the very weak kind, which do very minimum damage, easily survivable with adequate shelter. Really, the only people really kind of in the danger of that situation if you're in your car and you drive into it directly for an EF1. EF0, I think you're probably still going to be okay. And a mobile home, even EF0s are okay. EF1s will probably flip the mobile home and do some damage, and you'd be injured in that situation. So we always advise anybody to get out of a mobile home when it comes to a tornadic situation. But outside of that, if you're in your standard brick and mortar business or home, you're fine with those low end ones. So that's always the good news. But you would know that if you turn on the TV circus that you're going to see this spring if you're new here. I'm telling you, if you do, buyer beware. And if it really gets you worked up, my advice is turn it off. You don't need it anyway, and then put me on, and like I said, I'll put you to sleep. Those guys will make you drink heavily. So anyway, all right, listen, I'm out of here. I went on about 30 minutes too long because I wanted to show you a little forecasting on the fly of what happens when you actually look at real data versus all the hype and anxiety when people are talking about a Sunday storm, on Tuesday, and they're getting all worked up over it about tornadoes, and they're over promising and they're going to under deliver later. This is what really happens. So I want to show you at least what happens there and give you some of the stuff that I look at. Just kind of get an idea of what's potentially on the table. So there you have it. All right, listen, you guys have been great. Again, thanks for watching. Again, don't be surprised if you're a little bump in the night. If you're late, you missed it. We talked about some storms moving in during the early morning hours before drive time, quickly moving to the east during our morning from west to east across the state. Could be a stray tornado across eastern favorable areas. Probably it's eastern Oklahoma, either northwestern Arkansas, southwestern Missouri for maybe 1 or 2 in that general vicinity. It would be a QLCS type, a weak one. But that's the best I can do for you. I don't think there's anything really more than that, other than a few spots of some wind around 60 to 70 miles per hour. And some good fashion rain, which is what we need. And then we'll go from there. We'll see if any light freezing rain that may happen on Friday afternoon and evening. If that does happen, be careful on bridges and overpasses. And then again, the storms on Sunday night into Monday morning across the state. So that's your quick 1-minute roundup. All right, I got to get out of here. You guys have a great night. Sleep well, and we will talk again soon. Take care.